Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics, our regular review of all the week's political news and events live on KMTV. Now, it was supposed to have been the solution to Operation Stack, but the government this week put the brakes on its plans for a lorry park off the M20. So, why exactly did the Transport Secretary engage reverse gear, and is it really game over? And as the clock continues towards Brexit Day in 2019, are MPs right to claim that urgent action is needed now to plan for new customs checks at ports like Dover? And if we don't, we are likely to face, as one MP put it, Operation Stack on steroids. With us to discuss these issues are Matthew Webb of Stanford Parish Council. He led the opposition to the lorry park plan, and Labour County Councillor Dr Lauren Sullivan. Thanks to both of you for coming in. First, what led the government to a massive U-turn on its plans for a lorry park in Kent? Louisa Britton reports.
Kent could be left in a state of gridlock after Brexit. That's according to MPs who've warned against major travel disruption in the county, saying we could be facing Operation Stack on steroids as soon as we leave the European Union. The Home Affairs Select Committee said urgent action was needed, adding the government's plans for an increase in border staff were unconvincing. It comes after plans for a major lorry park the size of Disneyland off the M20 west of Stanford were axed by the government. The £250 million project was going to be built here and was presented as a solution to Operation Stack, which in 2015 brought Kent to a standstill for several weeks.
Of course, I'm disappointed that we're not having what we were led to believe that we would be having, because this is something which affects all of us in Kent, and we've seen the dire consequences when this issue wasn't dealt with in relation to 2015.
But it appears the government didn't assess the environmental impact of the project, and the Department for Transport added the park, which would have been the second largest in the world, had to be scrapped just weeks before a judicial review of the plans. Although residents in Stanford have welcomed the news, lorry drivers aren't so optimistic.
FTA thinks this is a major disappointment. Any future management of Operation Stack is now going to be many years away, and that is a concern to us and our drivers. We don't want to return to a situation of 2015 where the M20 was in gridlock. What we want to have is a plan in place so that drivers know exactly where they're going in an Operation Stack situation. We want good facilities for those drivers, and it's important that we have clarity going forward as to what the government is going to do.
A spokesperson for Kent County Council said,
"We are very disappointed that the government is no longer constructing this permanent lorry holding area as quickly as it could have done. Whilst we appreciate work will continue on new plans, this will not be even considered as a planning application until 2019. And with the uncertainty over Brexit and its effects on the ports, we would consider something needs to be done now."
With Stack having had an estimated cost to Kent's economy of around £1.5 million a day and across the country of about £250 million a day, and with the added pressure of Brexit, it seems another solution to the possibility of Stack could be pressing. This is Louisa Britton for KMTV.
Well, Matthew, you are understandably delighted at this week's announcement, but there's a potential sting in the tail, isn't there? Because Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, has said that he's going to start the process of applying for a lorry park.
He has. I think a lot of this is to do with the government trying not to lose too much face with the fact that they've climbed down already. What's annoyed a lot of us is that the government, during this climb down, has tried to put the finger of blame for taking the savour of a lorry park away from the people of Kent. For launching a judicial review. Now, we've always said a lorry park was not the solution to Operation Stack, and that remains the case. We also believe that the real reason the government has climbed down over the Operation Stack lorry park is because it really needs to focus its attention on what it's going to do after Brexit, and it's only got limited funds with which it can address that.
But the park would have done a lot of the things that it wants to do for Brexit.
No, the park would do nothing to address post-Brexit changes to freight in Kent. The problem post-Brexit will be an increase in freight customs clearances at Dover and the Channel. Therefore, if you want to stop chaos on Kent roads, you need to ensure that the customs clearance facilities are brought up to the correct size and capability to do those clearances. If you don't, if you build a lorry park, all that's going to happen is the lorries will still be stuck. The lorry park will overflow because the capacity of the one they wanted to build in our parish wasn't even a third of the size of the vehicles stuck in Operation Stack. So it doesn't solve anything. You need to keep the vehicles moving, and to do that post-Brexit, you need to increase the customs clearance facilities at both the Channel and at the Port of Dover.
Sounds sensible, Lauren. Is that the right approach to the wider problem of traffic congestion in Kent pre and post Brexit?
Certainly needs to be a bigger emphasis on the overall structure of Kent, and maybe even look at other ports along the Kent. Certainly Ramsgate or even Folkestone. Maybe try and spread the load so you're not focusing all that traffic on
my
Dover.
understanding is that customs checks is not a kind of a point at which you do it. It could perhaps be done electronically before you actually get to Dover or get on the M20.
But potentially that's right. But the problem that they're worried about post-Brexit is that there will be an increase in physical customs checks. Now, there could be a best case scenario to that and a worst case scenario. I would suggest that the government has got the time to work out what the worst case scenario in terms of increase in physical customs checks of freight vehicles would be, and decide what kind of customs capability they need and where best they need to put it to make sure that chaos isn't caused.
Well, let's have a reminder of the personal side of the argument. 2 years ago, Josie Hannett spoke to a family whose home looks onto what was the lorry site and some may think may yet still be.
It was supposed to be built west of Stanford, and many homeowners were completely against the idea of more than 3,500 lorries being held just metres from their home. When the plans were first proposed in 2015, I spoke to the Isherwood family, who said they were devastated at the thought of the park.
This is supposed to be their home for life. I can't even begin to imagine how I'm going to cope with helping them to understand the construction of a lorry park.
But thankfully for the residents, the U-turn happened, much to the delight of campaigners.
It's been the power of the people that have actually forced this forward, local support, various companies that were against it as well, and it's a tribute to people.
Roads Minister Jessie Norman, in a statement, said, "We know how seriously the lives of Kent residents and the prospects of businesses were affected when Operation Stack was implemented, and we remain fully committed to a permanent solution." Pulling the plug on the park the size of Disneyland will have cost the government a lot of time and money, but that's much to the delight of nearby residents who don't want thousands of freight vehicles taking over their small village. This is Josie Hannett for KMTV.
Well, Matthew, let's pick up on this issue again about what the solution is post-Brexit. And even before Brexit, Kent still has a problem with what they've been dubbed fly parking lorries on side streets in residential areas. I mean, what is, in your view, is the solution to that? Because leaving aside the lorry park and Brexit, that is a key issue.
Fly parking is a key issue, but it's not the same issue as Operation Stack. Fly parking happens every day of the year and is to do with lorries having to stop somewhere in Kent. There are already a number of commercial lorry parks in Kent. In fact, there is one in my parish at the moment, so we're not NIMBYs. We do have a lorry park already. And a lot of those lorry parks are keen to expand. They put that expansion on hold for the last 2 and a bit years because they were scared of having to face unfair competition from a potentially government-run lorry park.
I mean, but do they have the capacity to fill the gap? And you said 3,600 was not going to...
No, but that's for disruption caused by Operation Stack.
Yes, but I mean in terms of the scale of the problem.
But are you talking to me about Operation Stack, or are you talking to me about overnight fly parking?
I'm talking to you about overnight fly parking.
Well, overnight fly parking is nowhere near 3,600. I think the last survey that Kent Highways did suggested that the gap of overnight parking spaces on average was around 900 to 1,000 per night.
Now, and do you think the commercial sector has the capacity to...
I know for a fact that commercial lorry parks in Kent are already wanting to expand to a size that would fully accommodate that number of spaces.
Laura, I mean, if Matthew is right about this, I mean, the government ought to be funneling its money into creating more lorry parks or providing extra capacity in existing lorry parks.
I think the government, given that it's representative of the entire UK, it needs to be thinking bigger and actually maybe looking at ports around the rest of the British Isles. You know, the fact that so much freight and lorries and traffic comes through Kent without its destination in Kent, there could be, you know, opportunities to expand across either side. There needs to be incentives for that.
You're a Gravesham representative at the north, and we see the problems there, because obviously the third Thames crossing is going to funnel a lot more traffic into Kent, and it starts where you are.
It does, yeah. So obviously Dartford face the brunt of the Dartford crossing at the moment, and the proposed Lower Thames crossing, which is the preferred option of option C. We, as the Gravesham Borough Council, were obviously against this unanimously. But we're not going to throw our toys out the pram. We're actually going to try and work through and make that option better.
I mean, one of the problems that I see for Kent is that you have, you know, the third Thames crossing, the planned lorry park. The network isn't being developed as widely as it needs to be. It's solving a problem at one point, but not at another.
Yeah, exactly. So what? Do you want to go on?
No, go on.
Okay,
so hurry up, because we've got to go to the break.
The infrastructure is also very important, and connecting certainly where the Thames crossing will be to M20 is going to be very important.
Okay, when we come back, why do environmental groups fear that the governments can't see the wood for the trees? And should healthcare organisations be fined for taking too long to take charge of mentally ill patients detained in custody? We'll be back soon. Welcome back to Paul on Politics, live on KMTV with guests Dr Lauren Sullivan and Matthew Webb. Now, Kent Crime Commissioner Matthew Scott has called for new powers to allow police forces to recover money from mental health care trusts if they don't act swiftly enough to take charge of mentally ill people in custody cells. Let's hear from the Commissioner himself.
People will end up in a police cell more likely because there is nowhere else for them to go within the NHS. It's an issue with the availability of suites that are suitable for someone who is being detained under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act. Police time is around 1/3 now being spent dealing with cases involving mental health. Yes, the police do have a role to play in the protection of the individual, the protection of the public more widely, and making sure that a vulnerable person does get support. But my concern is that in too many occasions handovers are taking perhaps too long, and that there are times when people should be going to the NHS rather than coming to the police. The NHS budget is one of very few budgets that's actually been going up in real terms in recent years. Clinical commissioning groups are responsible for the commissioning of certain services. There is more money, there has been more money within the NHS. It's about making priorities. That we do need clinical commissioning groups to do more to commission services so that people can access support out of hours, at weekends, so that we don't see people coming into police contact because there is nowhere else for them to go.
Well, Lauren, he's got a point in a way, hasn't he? Because, you know, it's not the police job to look after mentally ill people, is it? And placing them in custody cells is probably the worst thing that can happen to them.
He has got a point in that it is the worst place for them. These people need care, and they need specialist care. The fact that there is no provision for that care is a travesty. We need to invest far more in mental health beds and the expertise to take care of them. They shouldn't be ending up in police cells. The fact of charging other agencies it's going to hamper those relationships which are so important.
But it might focus the mind of mental health care trusts, mightn't it, if they know they're going to face financial penalties?
I think we know that there is issues in financial care, and that is only going to have to be solved from government, in that there needs to be far more money and provision for mental health care. So I look forward to that in the budget.
A question of money, is that all it is, do you think, Matthew, or do you think there's a different approach to be taken?
I mean, obviously both the police service in Kent and the NHS are both under budgetary constraints. It is a difficult thing to resolve without central government help. I think it's a question of public safety though as well, and much as it would be far better for people with mental health issues to be in dedicated mental health facilities where they could get proper care. At the bottom line, if they need to be held somewhere for their safety and public safety, if it happens to be a police cell, that surely is better than seeing another headline where the police or the NHS have released somebody back into into society with problems, and then they've gone on to either harm themselves or someone else.
I think the police argument is that they're used as the default option for far too many times, and the capacity issue is one which rests with the mental health organisations.
But if the mental health organisations do not have the capacity, and I suspect that is one of the main reasons they're not reacting swiftly enough, asking to recharge them doesn't resolve anything. It just takes more money out of their pot of money.
Well, and in a way, it circulates the money around organisations which are publicly funded in any case. So, have you dealt with particular cases yourself, Lauren, in relation to this issue?
In my county councillor role, I'm obviously new, and I've been going around my patch, if you like, going to see the services. And just this week, I went to the adult social services, and even in their care facility, they've had cases of extreme mental health acute stages where they couldn't cater for their needs, and that was then having a knock-on effect on the services that they were prepared to provide.
Well, yeah, mental health is getting a bigger show in the spotlight nowadays, isn't it? Which is not a bad thing.
I think definitely youth mental health is becoming it is a big issue, and it's about time that we should also shine the light on providing mental health care for young people also. Okay,
well, thanks for that. Now, with the budget looming next week, it seems the government is going to underline its commitment to building more homes. Housing Minister Sajid Javid warmed things up by listing 15 councils who he claimed were not building enough homes, including Thanet. But at what cost? Campaigners have warned that developers are scything away at our trees and too few are being replanted. Louisa Britton reports on how there is alarm at the rate at which trees are being felled to make way for homes.
Kent slipped into a state of deforestation. That's according to the Woodland Trust, that says a record number of trees are being ripped up by developers while planting rates are the lowest in almost half a century. This forestry crisis comes as uprooted trees aren't being replaced and as local authorities face more pressure to build homes in the county. Well, this is Bluebell Wood near Maidstone, one of the ancient woods here in Kent. But it seems these sorts of natural and diverse habitats could be under threat, not just across the country, but also here in our county of Kent. Across the UK, the Woodland Trust manages more than 1,000 forests, but says many of these are under threat from new homes, transport projects, as well as quarries.
Well, in Kent, we're aware of 36 ancient woodlands under threat, and there may be more. We have to rely on volunteers to tell us about this. So when there's not tree planting going on as well, woodland creation, then you're effectively in a state of deforestation, which for the Garden of England, you just wouldn't think that's going to be possible. We're just concerned that with increased pressure for development, that these sort of scenarios are going to be more frequent. So we're calling on the government, when they review the National Planning Policy Framework, to to give ancient woodland an irreplaceable habitat the same status as built heritage. That will at least, hopefully, stop some of these small attritional, little bits of woodland here and there that are being lost. It's irreplaceable. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Well, Lauren, the wider issue here is the subject of too few affordable homes, and Kent is particularly feeling that pressure. So isn't this the right approach? Some people are obviously concerned about the environment and safeguarding natural resources, but at the end of the day, there are lots of people who can't afford homes.
It is a very difficult and delicate balance to strike. The big issue is affordable homes, certainly in my area, and getting those affordable homes that are truly affordable is obviously a really, really big concern, certainly with the Ebbsfleet Garden City on our doorstep.
Well, it's interesting that the Conservative government is paying attention to this issue. I mean, are they taking some of your ideas and in terms of trying to improve the situation?
I haven't spoken to them directly, unfortunately. I've got a lot of good ideas, but no, they're not taking any ideas on. What they could do, what certainly Ebbsfleet Garden City, have the ability for compulsory purchase, and that would really reduce the cost of housing and selling the houses. So that would make it truly affordable. So if that's a route that could be enforced, definitely go for it.
Matthew, this is the argument about, should the Garden of England be preserved at all costs? I mean, do you think that the need for more affordable homes overrides those kind of environmental concerns?
I think there is a need for affordable housing, but it's demonstrating that the housing that is being built is affordable housing and not just more housing for developers to make money out.
I mean, do you think developers are put under enough pressure to provide enough homes?
Well, I mean, an interesting example, the proposed Otterpool garden town in Shepway, which is looking to build nearly 13,000 homes over the next 25 years or so, that's going to take a lot of current farming and woodland out of circulation. Now, Shepway claim that a lot of that will be affordable housing. However, they already have capacity in their local plan for all the housing that central government has asked them to build. These 12,000, 13,000 homes they're going to build, the district council are going to profit from this, and they're building it next to a railway station, which will allow commuters to go into London. Locally, a lot of us think this isn't going to be affordable housing. It's going to drag people who live in South East London into these homes to line the pockets of Shepway District Council.
Let's have a listen or a look at what Sajid Javid has said about the need for councils to build more homes. He said, "I'm particularly concerned about the 15 local planning authorities that have recently either failed the duty to cooperate or failed to meet the deadlines set out in their local development schemes. My department will begin formally considering the case for intervention as deadlines are missed." Well, he's made his point very clear there. I mean, I suppose you're also a Gravesham councillor. You probably resent any top-down government on these things. The Conservatives have always said it's up to local councils to decide.
It is very difficult. I sit on the planning committee, and it is very difficult where you're weighing up the greater good of your residents that we represent, and knowing that if it goes to the inspector and it gets overturned, we lose all kind of any say or any rights to it. So it's a very difficult balance to have, and it's going too close to the...
I mean, Gravesham is kind of an urban area.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's got some kind of greenfield types, but isn't that the place where it would be appropriate to build more homes? If you're not encroaching on kind of, greenfield or greenbelt land.
We've got a lot of greenbelt land, and I think that is being reviewed at the moment.
Matthew, if the government doesn't intervene, then councils will simply do what they like, won't they? I mean, that's one of the problems. It's why the government feels it's necessary to issue this threat.
I think it's a question of balance. I mean, they haven't really had to threaten Shepway. They put the carrot of the garden town.
Interesting, Shepway was amongst the indicative figures under the new threshold, was one of the lowest actually in that table of Kent councils.
What, in terms of new homes?
Yes,
they were going to, but they were meeting the targets that the government had placed for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you feel about a large development like Otterpool, effectively building new towns?
Well, I think the balance has to be got right between environment and the need for housing. And also, Shepway need to engage with local residents in the way that they claim they are doing and getting...
Well, I'm going to have to stop you there because we've run out of time as always. That's all from us here at Paul on Politics. Thanks to our guests tonight for coming into the studio. Thanks for watching. We'll be back very soon.